Since I have shared with you guys that whenever I start a new study resource, I first go through an audit phase of that resource, you have been repeatedly asking me to show you what I meant by auditing my resources. So I guess this is the topic of today's video, and I hope you will get the answers to all of your questions. Minasan konnichiwa, Ari desu. Hi everyone, my name is Ali. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're covering the topic of how I audit my study resources before I dive into them. So I guess we're gonna start with the basics first. And what do I mean by auditing? An audit is essentially the systematic review or assessment of something, in this case study resources. And in my opinion, you want to go through this process before you dive in head first in your self-studying with any resources. And today I will share with you step by step what my exact process is when auditing new study resources, especially the resources I use for self-studying languages, but not only, because what I will share with you today is not only related to language learning. In fact, it is a process I would advise you to recreate whenever you start a new study resource you plan on using, with the intention of memorizing the contents or with the perspective of being tested on the contents. Auditing your study resources before you dive headfirst into them is a necessary step, in my opinion, and frankly, to be honest with you, I wish I would have understood this when I was still at uni. Alright, so here is my step-by-step process when auditing new study resources I'm going to be using. The process has 6 steps in it. The last one is optional, and here are all the steps we're going to be covering today. The step 1 is going to be understanding the resource purpose. Step 2 is going to be checking the resource structure. Step 3 is going to be checking the how to use section. Step 4 is going to be doing a test run to see how you want to use it. Step 5 is going to be creating your own program. And step 6 is going to be updating your resource tracker. And now let's dive into each of these steps one by one. So let's go with step 1 first, understanding the resource purpose. So in today's video, I won't cover the thinking that happens beforehand, before you even choose what resource you're going to use, because that's a whole other topic, right? But before you even buy any resource or start using any resource, you should at least have a sense of what the resource is. And if you get the resource from someone else, then step 1 is when you will then understand what this resource is. Study resources can be of various types. You have textbooks, practice books, exam preparation books, reference manuals, and of course you also have immersion resources like news articles, YouTube channels, TV shows, podcasts, and just plain books. And the way you're going to use any study resource, of course, depends on the type of study resource you have on your hands. Once you've understood what kind of resource you're going to be studying with, keep it in mind throughout this entire process, because it will inform every other step along the way. Step 2 will be checking the resource structure. Does it have chapters or sections? How long are they? Does it contain lots of explanations or none at all? How long are the explanations? In which language are the explanations? Does it have exercises? If it doesn't contain any exercises, do you want to test yourself on any part? And I also take time to look at and digest the table of contents, trying to understand beforehand what each section is about. Guys, I must say here that this is something I see so many people not do. So many of my coaching clients as well. I have this conversation pretty much every single week with someone. Because if you are struggling with finishing your study resources, staying motivated, staying engaged with your study resources, you must never forget getting a broad overview of the resource you're going to be using before you dive in, because simply checking the table of contents and making sure you grasp everything that is covered in the study resource before you go in. This will really help you to always keep in mind what is ahead of you while you are studying the resource. So this will help you with, staying focused on your studying while you're using the resource, not take too much time using the resource, because it might not require you to take 1 hour for each chapter when you could cover them in 20 minutes. This will also help you staying alert and engaged with your studying, and overall it will help you memorize much better and even quicker what you are learning through the resource. So really keep that in mind, and if you are experiencing any of the struggles I just talked about, do yourself a favor and try this audit process for yourself. In this step, I also take time to determine whether or not I will need to go through everything that is contained in the study resource, because it may happen that I know all of what is covered in one specific chapter, for example. So in that case, I know that I will just go through it very quickly while using the resource and not dwell on it for very long, or simply overlook it altogether. Step 3 is checking the how to use section of the study resource, because most study resources actually have a how to use section at the beginning, so why shouldn't you use it? You know what I mean? I used to always overlook this part and just go straight in, but the more time passes, the more I realize that this is actually helping me save time afterwards. If I take those extra minutes at the beginning before I dive in to understand how the creators of the study resource meant for the study resource to be used, you may use these as recommendations to then devise your own study plan afterwards. And I want to give you some examples here. Make sure you get my point. For the new resource I started recently, Otona no Goiryoku, which is a practice book for Japanese natives to help them grow their vocab range. The recommendation which I found on the how to use page is to go through a double page of exercises every single day for 54 days. But I don't want to use it over such a long period of time, because I do have other resources after that I want to cover. And also when doing my test run, I realized that this was not taking me that long to go over a double page. So I divided the recommendation time in two and plan to go through the practice book in about 20 days instead of 54. With the Tobira textbook, which I used back in 2020, overall I pretty much used the textbook as it was intended to be used. However, I couldn't use the end of chapter conversation prompts because in my case, since I was studying on my own and not in a classroom, I simply could not go over them and I overlooked that part. These are examples of how you can adapt the use of any study resource in particular to your own environment and set of circumstances. Take a little bit of time, not even 5 minutes, to go over the how to use section, and in the end you may even use the book just as it is recommended to be used if the book is straightforward, if the textbook or practice book is straightforward, or you may just use it as a stepping stone to then create your own study plan with the study resource. So in any case, it's not wasted time. Now step 4 will be doing a test run to see how I want to use the resource. So I will essentially go through the first pages, the first section, the first chapter, whatever is coming first in the study resource. And this will help me determine exactly how I want to use the resource. I asked myself, do I simply want to go over the material and not take any notes? Do I want to take notes? If yes, what kind of notes? Which notebook am I going to use? Which stationery will fit it the most? What pens? What highlighters? Do I want to highlight anything for future review or to keep engaged with the material while I'm going through it? Am I looking for anything specific while going over the resource? Am I looking for rare vocab, for example? Am I going to highlight that, or am I going to highlight some explanations that I find useful? How much brain juice does it require of me to go through the material? Is it difficult to understand? Is it quick? Is it quick and easy to do? All of these elements, and you will devise them as you do your test run yourself, will then help me with the next step. Step 5 will then be finally creating my own study program, my own study plan, because understanding everything we have covered in the previous steps in this audit phase helps me create my own study program on how I actually want to be using that resource. And this will look something like this. Resource purpose. This resource will help me with upgrading my vocab range, understanding grammar better. Time frame. I want to be done with this resource within 3 to 5 weeks, within 2 to 3 months. Usage frequency. I want to sit down with this resource 1 time, 2 times, 3 times a week. Session duration. Every time I sit down with this resource, I will spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour with it. Session time. If possible, I will do my study sessions in the mornings because I need more brain juice to go over this resource. Or, if possible, I will do my study sessions in the evening because this resource doesn't require that much brain juice from me, so it's possible for me to go over it quickly in the evenings. Usage. While going over the chapters, I will take notes of the rarer vocab I encounter, write down responses on this notebook, highlight any explanation I found the most useful. And finally, we've come on to the last step, which is also an optional step, in fact, and it is updating my resource tracker. If you are tracking your study resources like I do, now might be a good time at the end of this audit process to actually create the entry for this new study resource inside your resource tracker, whether it is a paper tracker or a digital tracker. If you are interested in this topic, please stay tuned on my channel because I am about to produce a new video on the topic of study resources trackers and how I have been tracking my study resources since the beginning of my language learning journey, so I hope you will enjoy this future video. I usually do my resource audit the previous week before starting to use any new resource. I choose one that I want to use next, and during the last week of using the previous resource, I do the audit phase of my next resource, and then from the next week onwards, I start using my new resource. I hope that's clear. So it means that once my audit is done, I commit to starting the new resource pretty much right away. Now, I didn't want to end this video without talking to you about some important points. The first one of which is how long should the audit take you? So in terms of duration, how long should this process take you? It will depend on a few factors, including the resource itself, what kind of resource it is, and how long it will take you to, for example, perform step 2, understanding the resource structure, and also step 4, how long it will take you to do your test run of the resource. I can tell you how long it takes me now to audit my resources. Overall, it takes me about 10 minutes to an hour. And sometimes I do it all in one go, while on some other times I actually do it over the span of a few days to make sure I digest everything I understood from the resource and I can then create my study plan, my study program out of it. So my advice here would be to just try it for yourself and see how long it takes you personally to go through this process. And of course, while keeping in mind that you will get better at it with time, so the more experienced you get, the less time it will take you to audit your resources. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about was, should you or should you not write down your study plan? Once you're at step 5 and step 6, should you write down what kind of strategy you devised from your resource audit? And here my answer would be that, again, it depends. Personally, I don't like to write anything down because in any case I have it on my mind. I study every day. I study languages every day. So every day I go through this process of remembering what my strategy was per resource. So I guess I'm not going to forget it anytime soon because my study pace is so intense. But if you do write it down, my advice here would be to not be bound by it. Be careful there because whatever study program you devise and then write down is not set in stone, and you should have a flexible mindset about it. I do have a flexible mindset about my study programs as well, meaning that whatever program, whatever plan I think of after doing my study resource audit, I leave myself the opportunity to change afterwards while I am actually studying with the resource using my own plan. using the resource, it may happen that things don't go exactly as I planned them, and that's perfectly okay. So it may look like me going quicker than I thought to go through the resource, or slower than I thought to go through the resource, or I may not need to cover everything that I thought I would need to cover from the resource. I may need to take notes, even though in my study plan I thought I wouldn't need to take notes, or the other way around, I may not need to take notes after all. Or I may realize that I need something more, an additional step to my study plan, to my study program, to keep engaged with the material and maintain my motivation levels to go through it and, reach the end of my study material, etc., etc. New things may appear, let's say, in my vision of how I should use the resource. And so in that case, I would just adapt, of course, my study program and the way I use the resource. In my opinion, it's very, very important to stay flexible nonetheless. Alright, so guys, I think that will be all for today. I told you everything I wanted to tell you on this topic. If you have more questions, of course, as usual, please leave them down below. And otherwise, I will see you in my next video. Bye bye! Matane!